and Alaska Public Media reporter Tegan Hanlon. Charlene, part of the tension that I'm hearing in this conversation is the need for economic development, but also a desire to protect the Arctic refuge. On the economic development side, where are the opportunities there to ensure communities are able to sustain themselves?
Well, I think for a long time, oil and gas has been suggested as, the primary way rural communities can really have economies. But the reality is the oil and gas industry is an absolutely unsustainable economy. And we're seeing it right now with the overall economy in Alaska. With the oil prices going down, we're really in an economic recession here. And so it is not really going to be the future solution for sustainable economic development for Alaska or for our small remote communities. There are other options.
And what are some of those other options for communities that are concerned about how to maintain themselves? Okay, I think we're having some trouble with Charlene's line. We'll try to get her back. We got this email from Rhonda who says, can the public crowdsource and compete for these leases like Nature Conservancy does and just not use them? Tegan?
So the drilling rights, are supposed to go to the highest qualified bidder, and regulations call for those winning bids to be reviewed by government agencies afterward, before leases are finalized, which has been, part of that question about what President-elect Joe Biden could do when it comes to a lease sale. Typically it takes weeks or even months to finalize those leases. So it'll be interesting to see if, we see the Trump administration finalize the leases in its final 2 weeks in office, or if there's potential that those leases drag into Biden's administration for finalization.
And Charlene's back with us. Charlene, I'm not sure if you heard my question, but I was asking where those economic opportunities are for communities concerned about sustaining themselves.
We have a lot of examples of communities throughout Alaska which are really taking advantage of some of the trends with growing industries like healthcare, like tourism, like jobs that will allow for remote working positions now that we have, internet capability throughout much of the state. So really there's tons of opportunity out there that we really need to be exploring more.
Tegan, this sale is one of many actions the Trump administration is rushing to get done before January 20th that conservation groups oppose. Can you just give us a couple of other examples as we wrap up here?
Sure. So I think one of the other large examples is the Tongass National Forest, which is huge in southeast Alaska. And in late October, the U.S. Forest Service cleared the way to open about 9 million acres of the Tongass, or more than half of that national forest, to logging and road construction and other forms of development. And that reverses nearly 2 decades of protections under the Clinton-era policy known as the roadless rule, which had banned logging and road construction in much of the national forest system. So that was a, really controversial decision. It's something Alaska political leadership have long pushed for, to remove the roadless rule from the Tongass. However, it's also something, environmental groups say that lifting this rule and these protections could devastate the Tongass. And scientists point out that the trees of the Tongass have stored carbon for centuries.
Well, this is certainly a story we'll keep an eye on. That's Tegan Hanlon. She's a reporter for Alaska Public Media. Also with us, Matthew Rexford, the tribal administrator for the village of Katovik in Alaska, and Charlene Stern, vice president of the Tanana Chiefs Conference and an advisor to the Arctic Village Council. Thanks to you all. Over the last few weeks, we've been hearing your pitches for our annual series of listener-picked shows, and now it's time to vote. Head to our Facebook and Twitter pages. Today's producer was Avery Kleinman. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Jen White. Thanks for listening. Let's talk more soon. This is 1A. Support for NPR comes from this station and from the William T. Grant Foundation. working to harness the power of research to make a difference in the lives of children, teens, and young adults for more than 80 years. Learn more at wtgrantfdn.org. From the Walton Family Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems to improve lives today and benefit future generations. More information at waltonfamilyfoundation.org. And from the listeners who support this NPR station. Early voting is now underway in Georgia. Democrats are looking to flip 2 vital Senate seats, and Republicans face a juggling act. Can they turn out their supporters and deal with the president who spent the last few weeks deriding the state's voting systems? The pulse of the Peach State next time on 1A.
That edition of 1A is scheduled for tomorrow evening at 8. A few seconds ahead of 9 o'clock, KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. I'm Bill O'Grady. Support for KUOW comes from HealthPoint, which believes that when the most vulnerable people are healthier, entire communities can become healthier. HealthPoint provides health care to anyone who needs it. More at healthpointchc.org/2020. Low around 40 tonight, mostly cloudy. Chance of showers this evening, chance of rain after midnight. Tomorrow, Tuesday, high near 50. Rain in the morning, rain likely in the afternoon.
Hi there, I'm Carol Off.
And I'm Chris Houghton. Coming up on As It Happens.
Brexit stage left. Just over a year ago, when a UK member of European Parliament warned that the country was heading for an exit from the EU without a trade deal, she was shot down by a pro-Brexit parliamentarian. Now she doesn't want to say, "I told you so," but she does believe it took some serious willful blindness not to see this coming.
And a brand aid solution. Cleveland's Major League Baseball team announces that it will, at long last, strike out a name that the team's owner admits is no longer acceptable in our world.
Those stories and much more coming up on the Monday edition of As It Happens.
Live from NPR News, I'm Shay Stevens. The Electoral College has formally chosen Joe Biden as the nation's next president by giving him 306 votes, or 36 more than he needed to win last month's election. In a national address from Wilmington, Delaware, Biden applauded election workers for defying Republican pressure to alter the results.
They knew this election was overseen by them. It was honest, it was free, and it was fair. They saw it with their own eyes, and they wouldn't be bullied into saying anything different. It was truly remarkable, because so many of these patriotic Americans are subject to so much, enormous political pressure, verbal abuse, and even threats of physical violence.
Security was increased in some states as electors cast paper ballots Monday. Michigan shut down its capital, citing credible threats of violence. Early voting is underway in Georgia for 2 Senate runoffs. From member station WABE, Christopher Alton reports that final results will determine which party controls the chamber.
Monday was the first day of early voting in Democrats Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock's bids to unseat Republican Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, respectively. Some metro Atlanta counties have seen wait times of over an hour. Despite difficulty walking, Cynthia McNeil came to cast her vote in person as soon as she could.
I said the first day I'm not waiting. I got the paper ballot, but they fussing so much about this paper stuff. I said I'm pushing the button. And so I'm here, me and the cane.
President-elect Joe Biden will be in Atlanta Tuesday to campaign for the Democratic candidates. For NPR News, I'm Christopher Alston in Atlanta.
The U.S. death toll from the coronavirus pandemic surpassed 300,000 Monday as the nation began its vaccination campaign. Frontline workers in the healthcare industry are receiving the first shots of Pfizer's vaccine. California Governor Gavin Newsom and the mayor of Los Angeles looked on today as an emergency room nurse got the COVID-19 vaccine there. More from NPR's Leila Follow.
Applause after one of the first healthcare workers to receive the COVID-19 vaccine at Kaiser Permanente Hospital in Los Angeles got her shot. LA County Supervisor Hilda Solis said this.
The past months have been, as you know, very challenging for all of us, but hope is here. Relief is here. And the vaccine is here.
The first batch of vaccines for the state, 33,150, arrives as California, like much of the country, grapples with its worst spike yet of COVID-19. But it will be months before most people can get inoculated, and officials are urging residents to continue to wear masks and social distance to bring down infection rates. Leila Faldin, NPR News, Los Angeles.
This is NPR News. California has fined Uber $59 million. State regulators say the ride-hailing firm is being penalized for failing to provide court-ordered information on sexual assault and harassment claims. Uber says it doesn't want to hand over full names and contact information on assault survivors without their consent. The Kremlin is denying media reports that Russia hacked computer networks at 5 U.S. government agencies, including the State Department and the National Institutes of Health. As NPR's Lucian Kim reports, the breach reportedly allowed the attackers to read internal emails at the Treasury and Commerce Departments.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman denies the reports, saying Russia had nothing to do with the cyber attacks and that the accusations are groundless. Speaking to reporters in Moscow, the spokesman recalled that in September, Putin proposed a treaty with the United States on cybersecurity, with formal guarantees of non-intervention in the other country's elections. In the past, Putin has offered President Trump to form a joint task force on cybersecurity, an idea that has gone nowhere. Putin has denied the Russian government conducts cyber attacks on the U.S., but has said it's possible patriotic hackers have acted on their own. Lucian Kim, NPR News, Moscow.
The State Department is blacklisting 2 Iranian officials blamed for the 2007 disappearance of former FBI agent Robert Levinson. Iran's UN mission says his government has no information on Levinson's whereabouts. At least 3 Americans are currently being detained in Tehran. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Merrill. Merrill Edge Self-Directed Investing has tools to help clients find answers to questions. More at merrilledge.com/withinreach. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Finner & Smith, Incorporated, registered broker-dealer.
I'm Carol Off.
Good evening. I'm Chris Howden. This is As It Happens. Tonight.
Worth the shots. One of the first Canadians to get a COVID-19 vaccine says after what her long-term care home suffered in the first wave of the virus, that jab in the arm couldn't come soon enough.
Guilty of manslaughter. A judge in Thunder Bay, Ontario, convicts a man for the death of the Indigenous woman he hit with a trailer hitch.
The never-ending story, with Britain facing the prospect of leaving the EU without a trade deal. They'll speak with a former member of European Parliament who was scoffed at for predicting exactly this predicament.
Hold the flown. When our guest found out Canadians could sign up to get one of the humongous flags flown over the Peace Tower, he figured why not? And now he has to figure out what to do with it.
New Jersey's in Ohio. Cleveland's baseball team finally announces it will change its name, but an indigenous activist who's campaigned for that change says the team's still not really playing ball.
And one man's meat is another man's poison. Although, to be clear, the problem with the traditional Wisconsin raw beef dish known as the cannibal sandwich is that it's made people sick, not that it's made of people. As it happens, the Monday edition, radio that assures you there's a lowercase c in ground chuck. There will be some sore arms in Canada tomorrow. Public health teams began administering the first doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to Canadians today. The shots went to workers and residents at facilities that have seen firsthand just how dangerous the virus can be. The first 5 recipients in Ontario work at Sherbourne Place, a long-term care centre in downtown Toronto. One of them was Colette Cameron, a registered nurse and the executive director of Sherbourne Place. We reached her in Toronto.
Colette, this is the shot we've all been waiting for. How did it go?
It went beautifully. Yes, it was such a privilege to be invited to be part of this day. My team and I were just overwhelmed by getting this opportunity. It went very, very well. It didn't hurt at all.
But now, do you have a sense that you're part of history at this point, aren't you?
Yes, we are. And it's remarkable that our little home that actually went through a fairly severe outbreak in the spring we've now been COVID-free since June, and we're working our darndest to make sure that we stay that way and to be able to protect our residents even more by being one of the first to get the immunization is just amazing.
The first 5 people in Ontario were all at your Sherbourne Place at the Mackay Centre. All of them have little bios that are attached to your names indicating the double shifts, the long hours, living at a hotel nearby in order to be there all the time. What was it like? Just give us a sense of how difficult things have been at Sherbourne Place.
Well, at the end of March, our first resident was diagnosed with COVID, and unfortunately it took a little while before we got the results from the time he was swabbed to the time we found out. So there is that time period where people were being infected, and also there is a time before he even became symptomatic that we felt a lot of the staff became infected. So at one point, most of the full-time staff on one unit had called in with COVID sickness, and so there was left with a skeleton staff, but we owe it to our residents to make sure that they're well cared for. So a number of us, I'm the executive director, but I donned my scrubs and I was on the floor and I worked as a PSW and I offered care and with my team, and we did everything we could to make sure that our residents were well cared for.
Says that you work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week on the front lines.
For a while, until UHN came in and brought in the reinforcements, and then we were actually able to breathe a sigh of relief.
What effect did that have on your families?
Oh, my poor spouse, when I did actually sleep at night, I'd wake up in the middle of the night in the nightmare worrying about PPE. There was one night, this is embarrassing, but I ran around the house going, the dogs don't have PPE. We need to get PPE on the dogs. It was just bizarre.
Did you actually did that, or was that your nightmare?
I actually got up, apparently. I don't even remember doing that. But in the morning, he said, do you not remember what you did? And no, I don't remember that. I think that's the amount of stress we were under. But yes, it's behind us. And as of today, let's hope we never go back there.
That is just extraordinary. And so now I'm getting a sense of what today must have meant for you and your colleagues.
Oh, it was just incredible. Like, this virus has wreaked havoc throughout the world. And by going there today and taking this small, painless injection, I'm helping bring this pandemic to an end. I'm just doing my little part, and we do it obviously for the residents and families here, but I do it for my own mom, who I haven't been able to hug because I'm terrified of bringing a virus to her, not knowing that I'm carrying it, even though we do get swabbed every week. And then a really special thing for me is my daughter is due today, and I expect to welcome a grandson in the next day or so. So it's just the two combined is just a wonderful day.
It's extraordinary. And so now, how secure are you with just having the one job? You have to get another one.
I have to get another one in 21 days, so January 4th, I'll be back to get my second shot. But then we're still going to have to continue with our masking and our shielding and social distancing and washing your hands and everything. Nothing changes once we get the vaccine until more and more people have it. So if anything, I could say to everybody, please continue to wear your mask.
But will you, after January 4th, will you be able to hug your grandson and your mother?
I will probably still wear a mask, just be on the safe side. We don't know just yet, how long your immunity will take to build up, so I will always err on the side of caution, but I will feel that I can actually do that with a mask on.
Have you had to try and convince anybody of the success and the efficacy of this vaccine?
Well, it's interesting. On Friday, when we were first told that our staff could be part of tomorrow and Wednesday, they were really quite hesitant. Maybe I'll wait and see how others do. And then after today, all our staff are signing up, and they're quite anxious to have the vaccine themselves. So I think they just needed to see somebody else do it first, and we were glad to do that for them.
Does you have a feeling of light at the end of a tunnel? Is that the sensation? How would you describe the sensation you have?
Well, it is the light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel is still quite long. It's still far out in the distance because, the five of us are just a drop in the bucket. Everybody else has to get on board, and everybody else has to get vaccinated so that we can actually come to the end of that tunnel.
Well, we're all trying to share in this vicariously with you, this moment that you have now. And yes, we're all in this together, have been and will be until it's done, right?
That's right. That's right. And all we can do is support each other, and I think this is a very easy way to do that.
Colette, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Carol.
And I'm happy that you're going to finally be able to see that grandson.
So am I. I'm so excited.
Take care.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Colette Cameron is the executive director of the Rakai Center at Sherbourne Place, a long-term care center in Toronto. And you can find more on this story on our webpage at cbc.ca/AIH. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said it often. He was going to get Brexit done. Problem is he hasn't yet, at least not the way he promised. Yes, the UK is set to leave the European Union's single market for good on January 1st, but a trade deal with the Union is proving a major sticking point. Mr. Johnson has been in furious negotiations with the EU, and if they fail, the UK must contemplate the cliff edge of a no-deal Brexit. For some, this last-minute crisis was entirely predictable. In fact, UK Green Member of European Parliament Molly Scott Cato predicted it. Here's an exchange from November 2019 in the European Parliament between Brexit Party MEP Robert Rowland and Molly Scott Cato.
I'd just like to ask Mrs. Scott Cato what empirical proof she has that the end of the transition period, when we will be leaving the European Union, hopefully on a Canada Plus style trade deal, will result in a cliff edge, when as far as I'm aware she does not have any degree in economics, or maybe she has some business experience that will give some empirical proof that that would be the case. Thank you.
Madam, you have the floor. Obviously you haven't been paying much attention to my CV because I was and I remain a professor of economics. I also have expertise in trade policy and have been studying the trade negotiations from the beginning. I rely on the expertise of other trade experts, all of whom have said it takes much longer than the time available to negotiate a treaty. And the likelihood is, if we go ahead with Boris Johnson's deal, we will end up in exactly the same crisis, facing a no-deal Brexit at the end of 2020.
I think Mr. Rowland stands corrected.
That was UK Green MEP Molly Scott Cato speaking at the European Parliament in 2019. Ms. Scott Cato is now a former MEP, but is still a professor of economics. We reached her in Stroud, England.
Ms. Scott Cato, when you hear that clip from a year ago, is it tempting to say, I told you so?
Well, it certainly isn't. It's tempting for me to say you should have called me Professor Scott Cato, but I'm absolutely cool about that. But no, I think last year when people heard that, they found it amusing because it was put down. But this year, they're saying, yeah, God, you were absolutely right. But the surprising thing is, it's not, everybody should have known this was going to happen. That's the thing I find frustrating, that there's so much ignorance, especially in this country, because it's so ideological here that people don't really understand what's going on.
What do you think made the members of the Conservative Party and the Brexiteers, what made them so confident that getting this trade deal with the EU was going to be a piece of cake?
Well, I think they believe their own fantasy, and that's been the problem with Brexit from the start. They start off saying the European Union's an unelected bureaucracy and, we'll get a trade deal in an afternoon. And they make up slogans like that to win the referendum in 2016. But then they're looking at the reality of the situation, which is that they've won the referendum based on untruths. And then they have to try and make the best of it. So they then try and convince the rest of us that what they were saying then was true. And when they confront the reality that actually the EU is a very democratic and very well-organized series of institutions, and it's not just going to roll over and give them a trade deal in the afternoon, then they just end up looking a little bit embarrassed. But they have to maintain the fiction, otherwise they look like liars. So, I mean, it's just an unholy mess, really.
But isn't it, it's also in the European Union's interest to have negotiated deals and not have a no-deal Brexit?
That's right. No-deal Brexit will damage both sides. But the point is that the EU has put its political objectives of maintaining the European Union and its single market above the economic damage. That's the problem, and the British government didn't believe that was the case. And to be honest, anybody that knew even a little bit about how the European Union works, that was obviously going to be the case. I mean, if Brexit was partly an attack on the European Union by people who, for various reasons, didn't want it to succeed, and so the European Union was clearly going to defend its individual member states and their shared market against Brexit and against a destructive UK. And so, it was going to be very hard getting a trade deal right from the start. And certainly it was always going to be impossible to be inside that single market unless you're prepared to stick to the rules of that single market.
But it seems Boris Johnson believes he's making progress now, and both the EU and UK are saying, well, there still is a narrow path to success here. What are the main sticking points? What does prevent the path at this point?
I think the fishing discussion has always been a bit of a red herring, if you'll pardon me. And the main sticking point has always been that one around, is the UK prepared to stick to single market rules? And the ideological commitment to sovereignty by the Brexiteers has always been a blockage to a trade deal, because a trade deal is about giving away some sovereignty to get trading advantages, and both sides give away some sovereignty in order to trade more openly together. And so if you keep sticking on this thing of sovereignty, you're making a trade deal very difficult. And really, I mean, whether or not we get a deal depends on whether Johnson now caves in on that issue of sovereignty.
But how does Boris Johnson do that and go back to the people that he that supported this, who voted for it, who the whole sales job was that they were going to take back control? That was the whole point of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But you see, they said we could take back control and still have this great trade deal. We could have our cake and eat it. So, no, you're right. I think it's incredibly difficult now for him to convince the more strident Brexiteers in his party. And after all, the more reasonable Tories were all kicked out before and during the last election. So, yeah, I agree. It's a very hard sell for him. I mean, he could get it through Parliament, because the chances are Labour will either vote for it and certainly abstain and not block it. So I think he'd get the numbers. But what does his future look like as a Prime Minister if he's kind of sold out on his main selling point from the last election? I mean, it's very difficult.
A lot of the language that's part of these negotiations is pretty complex, but there are some issues that are I think, worth exploring with you, and that's something called the ratchet clause that seems to be very important to the EU. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I think what's meant by that is that if the EU then strengthens protection, say, for example, banning glyphosate, then the UK would also need to ban glyphosate, and if it wasn't prepared to do that, then goods traded into the EU market, which were perhaps produced more cheaply because they had been produced using glyphosate, they would then need to pay a tariff when they went into the EU market. So that would be like a ratchet clause with a sort of specific tariff requirement if the UK didn't keep up with the ratcheting up of EU standards.
Isn't that the case, though, that no matter a deal or no deal, a lot changes for your country come January 1st? How will it be different that morning of New Year's Day?
There is a big difference, because I represent a farming area, or represented a farming area here in southwest England. And so, people producing cheese might be facing tariffs of 40%. It might be even higher if you're a lamb farmer or a beef farmer for your exports into the European Union. And our lamb farmers export, 60-80% what they produce into the European market. So that's the end of their business, basically. And then there'll be lots of complications for us as ordinary citizens. So, we've just celebrated giving up free movement, which I find a completely bizarre concept, because I rather like being able to move freely through my own continent. But that means For example, we won't have free health insurance that we used to have as EU members. That's particularly bad for people with pre-existing and chronic health conditions. We'll also have to get special car insurance, whereas at the moment we can just drive. We have to get an international driving permit as well. So there's a whole raft of restrictions, really, or additional checks that we'll have to go through when travelling in our own continent.